All right, it's time for our daily briefing here on Thursday, June 25th. Glad you can be with us on KLAM and KCDV if you're hearing this in the 1 p.m., 5 p.m., or 8 p.m. hours, or if you're listening online, welcome to youtube.com/Cordova TV, and we're glad you're checking in. We're going to visit with Mayor Copeland today, and it's largely encouraging news all around, it sounds like, as we review some significant changes to some rules that came out from the ferry system that were kind of eyebrow raisers there, but through some good effort, there have been modifications. Mayor Copeland will go over those, and we'll talk a little bit about yesterday's City Council meeting as well. That's up next on today's Daily Briefing. Well, Mayor Copeland, it's risky to predict anything in the year 2020, but you did kind of predict a couple of days ago that that some changes to this, what seemed at first blush completely unworkable set of COVID rules for the Marine Highway, that some changes would be coming, and that has in fact happened. So can you kind of summarize how, I mean, from Cordova's perspective, certainly how some sanity has now appeared in these ferry rules?
Yeah, absolutely. So as the Marine Highway System announced some new pretty discouraging requirements on top of an already challenging schedule for Cordova, me, Kathy Ranfelto with Chamber of Commerce, Representative Stutes, City Manager Howard, were fielding calls from businesses and citizens who had ferry trips pending and were very frustrated, essentially pretty much blocking their travel because of the unworkability. So Representative Stutes, I reached out and she immediately got a hold of the Marine Highway System. I basically just added some support to her and our city manager, Helen Howard, who reached out to the state's medical team to see if they had really had a chance to speak to the requirements. And Representative Stutes really, by the end of the day, had a response from the Marine Highway System that we should be hearing in the next day or two, that they were going to make some clarifications, and that really those requirements were targeted at inbound passengers coming into the state of Alaska, some of the Western Alaska communities who are at high risk, and then maybe some cross-Gulf routes that would create an opportunity for spread or interaction with out-of-state passengers.
Okay, so it sounds almost like thinking about these shorter routes, like for us, you know, a number of hours between Cordova and Valdez, Cordova and Whittier, were not in the forefront of the mind of the people who crafted this. So summarize what has now changed.
Okay, and in response to your comment, that's exactly right. And we're hearing the consistently same message from our state medical team and our local medical team. In-state travel is still very low risk for spread. And so as that has mapped itself into the Marine Highway System processes for us out of the Cordova route, the sound route, it just means that we do need to complete a passenger screening form before you board the vessel. And you have to be able to respond no to those questions. And those are, you know, some of the stock questions that we've come to expect, just a general health screening.
Right.
So those are coughing, difficulty breathing, a fever, signs of a fever, contact with someone who may have been infected, so forth. And once you get on board, you may as well be in Cordova. Pretty much the same requirements. While you're on most areas of the vessel, you need to wear a cloth covering. Unless, of course, you have a health issue or are exempt, and then the system will make reasonable accommodation. Otherwise, if you're eating or if you want to go to a designated smoking area, which is essentially out on the decks, then you don't have to wear the cloth face covering in those areas. And they encourage social distancing between passengers and crew and hand washing, sanitation. So really, it's kind of identical to the Cordova city requirements.
Yeah, and then they also mention here, I see, that passengers and crew won't be allowed to go ashore during port calls. You know, so if a ferry was going Cordova, Valdez, Whittier, you couldn't get off in Valdez, basically.
That's right, and that's the Kennecott. If I remember the routes, there's one or two lakes like that where that would apply, but that's correct. They're not going to let you disembark until your final port of destination.
Okay. All right, so definitely very, very different than what we were facing before all this work was done to clarify things. And, of course, the irony is that getting the testing you needed to get out of Cordova was never going to be an issue because we're so good at it. The worry was when how are you going to get back? But it sounds like for the purposes of Cordova's ferry needs, you feel pretty confident that this puts our people in the position they need.
Yes, for two reasons. I think it'll be safe to travel on the Marine Highway System. And, frustrating schedule aside, at least there won't be any additional challenges in traveling.
Yeah, well, and you and I were talking briefly before we rolled tape that in a way, there's almost at least a sliver of a silver lining in the Marine Highway having to do all this pandemic response and think about some things. And in fact, you wrote up a paper to send to the system dealing with some of those?
Yeah, so reaching clear back to October when Bert Adams, the director of Native Village at EAC, and Chairman Olson and the Tribal Council and myself met with Governor Dunleavy. Two of the things we committed to were a white paper regarding ways to improve the Marine Highway System and ways to improve fisheries, fish and game management and opportunities for coastal communities. And we've had a few things happen in the interim. So I did put forward that white paper, and I collaborated with some former employees on our routes of the Marine Highway System. And the irony is, just in a conversation this morning with the former mayor of Cordova, the Marine Highway System is broken so badly right now that it might actually get fixed. And I think that the pandemic is just forcing us to look at different options and alternatives. And similar to what we're doing locally with some of our financial challenges and historical service models.
Okay, so again, emphasizing it's very speculative at this point whether the system could come out at the end of this better or not. But at least you're feeling a glimmer of hope that some things we've been wanting to have get looked at might get looked at.
I think the state is going to have an opportunity to look at them. I think our local economic development district, our city leadership, and other communities in the Sound are talking to each other. And we're going to move towards better service, hopefully with the state as our partner. But one way or another, yes, I think we're going to see better ferry service. In the meantime, the state's rebuilding the Aurora, and I think their service will improve.
Okay. Well, that's certainly good news about those new rules, and people can find those probably by going to ferryalaska.com. I would imagine this information is there or elsewhere on the state site. Let's talk about yesterday's special council meeting. I didn't have a chance to tune in. What do you think were some interesting outcomes of that?
Well, I think that the first thing that jumped out at me, again, was the work of our staff, both as incident team members and providing service through the various city departments, and then the daily updates from the ambassadors and the great work they're doing at our ports of entry. And that kind of fed in from city staff and the city manager into recommendations for how to deploy our CARES Act funding that's come into the city. It's just over $3.4 million, and it has some pretty tight timelines and pretty specific uses. But the conversation around how do we help our individual citizens that are struggling economically? How do we help our local businesses that are struggling economically? How do we make really careful and wise investments of that CARES Act money that can mitigate a future pandemic, but also provide better service to the community in the meantime? And Council asked a lot of great questions exactly along those lines and got a lot of great answers. So I feel really good about Cordova's pragmatic and careful approach to making sure that money gets the highest and best value proposition for our citizens and businesses, which we know are struggling and we're very concerned about.
Yeah, you know, I remember some conversation a few meetings back about trying to find a way to invest any relief dollars in a way that really provides a maximum result for as many people as possible. And I know that resonated with me, and, you know, I would assume that the public will continue to be involved as this whole thing develops, so people should probably keep an ear on things and be ready to share their thoughts.
Absolutely, and I know the special meetings and the information overload and the pandemic itself is really grinding on our patience, but we didn't get any public calls at the meeting yesterday, and that did kind of jump out at me, so I do hope there will be public participation, and you can go to the city website and look at the agenda and the areas that we're looking at applying those funds, and the rough overview that the city council approved is really a one sheet, and then there's some specific areas that might be updated and improved on a second sheet. It's a quick read, and I would encourage public review and comment and feedback to your council and staff.
Okay. And then what about the new cases? We talked about that, what was it, earlier this week? I guess it must have been, about the discovery of some new positive cases at Ocean Beauty. Did that come up at all?
Yeah, we've got a great briefing from Dr. Hannah Sanders and from City Manager Howard. It's a management team, and it's kind of more of the same in that we have even better protocols for screening and detecting asymptomatic cases that are already in quarantine that can be further isolated to prevent community spread. And I think our doctor characterized it as very low risk to the community. But again, we do have active cases within our borders, and it just reminds us to follow good protocols. And just this morning, I see that there are 2 active cases in Valdez now, and one of those is a community resident case that apparently is following all the protocols. And so it's just a reminder that we do need to continue to be diligent, but Cordova's in good hands and in good shape thanks to our medical and incident management team.
So the assessment that you and Dr. Sanders had on this program earlier in the week, that, you know, while it's certainly a downer, to have anybody have to be suffering with this or going through this, while that's always a bummer, basically it continues to prove that the system is working and that Cordova is completely ready. Is that sort of the theme?
That's right. We don't have an elevated risk. We just have another reminder.
Okay. Well, and as you've said many times, as the burden of protection shifts from government mandates to individual responsibility, then we'll just kind of hope that people continue to embrace that and follow these things that will prevent some sort of big outbreak or businesses having to close back down or any of that. It's really on us. So anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, just great to see a break in the weather here in Cordova, and hopefully the fishing picks up here.
All right. Always good to hope for that. Thank you again for some time.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, good to have Mayor Copeland on our June 25th daily briefing. Remember, your best assets for information in Cordova regarding our response and everything that our response team knows about the pandemic. First of all, the website, covid19.cityofcordova.net. Lots of information there. You've got 424-INFO, the phone number that you can call to talk to a person and get answers to questions or even leave some comments. You've got the recorded message provided by the Village of EAC at 424-WELL. And if you want to do more follow-up and read these changes, these improvements by nearly all accounts to what's happening with the ferries, then you can go to the ferries website and get details there. I'm drawing a blank on what specific but it's you know, I'm sure you know where to find it. So anyway, thank you for listening in here. Daily briefings, 1 p.m., 5 p.m., and 8 p.m. hours on KLAM and KCDB, and online, youtube.com/Cordova TV. We'll return you to regular programming now. And we'll bring you the next briefing tomorrow here on the Clam and the Eagle.